Well, right away I realized I have to correct something there. Should have updated the bio. We actually have 6 children. Yeah, she doesn't know that we left her out. Joanna Marie is 3 months old, and that's why my lovely wife decided not to join us tonight. I am now driving to diapers. I have a 16-year-old at Gross Catholic, 3 at St. Bernadette's, where I went, which is really awkward to be in a parent-teacher conference and to start off the conference saying, listen, I'm so sorry for what I did when I was a student here. Please don't take it out on my child. They're better. They have their wife's DNA to complement. Anyway, we have 6 children, and I am super excited to be here for Legatus. There's so many familiar faces. Bernadette Esposito and I went to grade school together. No, not really. We did go to school together, but we got our master's degree together at Ave Maria. Mike Owens and Bernadette and many others were on my support team. I've had dinner at the Besmers, which was like a master's degree in family living. I mean, it was just, I'm very grateful, although I do get somewhat concerned because I want to make a really good impression, and then when I see familiar faces, I'm like, oh crap, all these people have heard my jokes. So I'm reminded a little bit of my first day as a missionary. This was the summer of 1999. This was one of Focus's very first campuses. I was going to a party with a number of students that we were going to be serving, and as we approached the party, we kind of the missionaries kind of decided okay, we drew straws. We're like, okay, some of us will get to drink, but some of us will just have pop, and we're strategizing about everything, just trying to make the right first impression. It was a little over the top, and in retrospect, the dorky matching polos and khakis was probably not the right approach. That was a hindsight realization. I felt really good though, because I connected right away with a young woman that I had known in high school. And praise God, it was one of the few young women that I'd known in high school that I didn't immediately need to apologize to. And so I was very happy to connect with her. Turns out she was a leader in this community, and I was so excited, to kind of connect with her. So we spent a lot of time talking, and near the evening there was a dance. And as we're standing out by the dance, this is Nebraska evening, late August before school started. And as we're talking, I noticed that a bug has landed on her arm. And so trying to be a gentleman, I just gently lean over to try and flick the bug off of her arm. Yeah, I thought it was a June bug. But as I flicked it, it didn't move. Yep, that's what I thought too. And I realized it was a mole. And all of my efforts at a first impression was Happy ending this story. I don't know if it was anybody in this room, but somebody removed the mole. She and I are good friends to this day. She's the godmother of one of my children. I'm the godfather of one of her children. She's still in counseling, but no, it was just, it was a great moment. So if tonight goes better than that, my desire to make a good first impression on the Legatus group, I feel like as long as I don't try and flick a mole off anybody's arm, I feel like we're going to be good tonight. I want to do a couple things. You guys get a bonus. There's 2 talks. One, I just want to tell you a little bit about what my office is doing for the Archdiocese, and then I want to share with you 4 myths of evangelization. So a couple of things. That vision thing, one church encountering Jesus, equipping disciples and living mercy, that's real. And what I mean by real is it's not just a poster that kind of got put up on the wall and then put in a desk drawer. The Archbishop is serious about this, and he's committed to it. He's made structures to his leadership team, to the way he leads and governs, that convinced me that it was real, that they really want to do this. And it was enough to get me to leave. I was very happy with Focus. I loved being a Focus missionary, but it was enough that I recognized that there was something special happening here that I wanted to be a part of. I'm part of the pastoral services grouping. So my peers, Dr. Mike Ashton in Catholic schools. This is a little too live. I can pull it back a little bit. Okay. Dr. Mike Ashton in Catholic schools, Shannon Brommer in the stewardship office, the Family Life office just hired a new director. Can't name drop that one yet, but he's going to be awesome. He or she is going to be awesome. And actually exceptionally qualified for the role. So the Family Life Office, the Office of Evangelization, schools, pastoral planning, and stewardship development. We're the pastoral offices. I think in years past, I can only really speak for my office, but in years past, I think the approach was to think of ourselves as direct service providers. So like, we will evangelize, we will comfort the grieving, we will help those who struggle with same-sex attraction and their family members. And we are taking, thank you to the leadership of Father Jeff Lorig, a decidedly different direction. We're moving to a business-to-business model. We're not trying to evangelize people. We're not trying to comfort people grieving. We're trying to help those who are on the front lines, who are even better positioned than us. One, because that's just not a scalable model. Better positioned than us to comfort the grieving. Some of you, I know many of you, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Popeye's chicken. One of the best business turnarounds ever. And part of their genius is they started to recognize, like, gosh, we've got all of these stakeholders. Who are we supposed to serve? Do we serve customers? Do we serve the board? Do we serve stockholders? Like, who are we serving? And what they zeroed in on is like, no, we serve the franchise owners. Nobody has a greater stake in the game than franchise owners. Well, for us, in the pastoral services for the Archdiocese, we realize our franchise owners are our pastors and our principals. They're the ones, they have the most stake in the game. They have the best opportunity to change the hearts and minds of Catholics in the pews. And so we're giving everything to supporting them. For my office, what that really practically looks like is coaching and mentoring of pastors and lay leaders. So we spend a whole lot of time on organizational health. Because usually when I ask, well, Father, tell me, you sound like you're a little overwhelmed. Oh yeah. Okay, so tell me, what's the organizational chart look like? And they're like, they usually kind of laugh, right? Because there isn't an org chart, and all however many staff there are report directly to Father. So we spend a lot of time on organizational health, and we spend a lot of time on giving them a vision for evangelization. Because if you catch our pastors in an honest moment, they say, I was made for this, I was ordained for this, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing. We never talked about evangelization in seminary. It just wasn't a thing. And that's not to bag on our seminaries. I mean, it's the same thing if you were to graduate from a military academy. We were preparing for the last war. I was like, I've been prepared. Our seminaries typically prepare men for the Counter-Reformation. But that's not the time we live in anymore. The same way that, our military academies tend to prepare people for the last war. It's not their fault. But now we find ourselves in a situation where they are in desperate need for someone to come alongside them, to walk with them, and to show them what the new evangelization could look like in their parish. So that's what we do. More on that later if you want to ask questions. I'm standing right in front of the speaker, so it's a little live. Okay. 4 myths about evangelization. I'm mostly looking forward to the question and answer, so I just want to have fun with this. I'll go through this, and then hopefully it's going to spur some conversation. So myth number 1, and this is just for context of this. When I started as a focus missionary, right, like 20-ish years ago, when I did, it's like, well, because I go around meeting with people, not a lot, actually many people in this room. It's like, so would you like to support a missionary? We're housebroken, we're great. Although it is like, some of you know this, when you decide to adopt a focus missionary, it's kind of like becoming a cat person. You're like, I don't know how it happened. We had 1 and now we have 5. And it's just like, it's a great thing, thank you. It's a huge service to the church. Well, suddenly in the last 20 years, evangelization has become cool. Right? It's like a buzzword. When we were like, so we're gonna go evangelizing, we're like, does the bishop know? People were suspicious when we talked, and now it's like the cool thing. Thank you, Pope Francis. Everybody wants to be a missionary disciple, and we hand out missionary disciple certificates, like participation certificates, and everybody's a missionary disciple, and everybody's evangelizing. But we don't necessarily know what that means. So, 4 myths to evangelization. Number 1, it's all evangelization. This is the really fun one, right? It's all evangelization. Well, everything. I mean, the craft fairs evangelization, and the spaghetti dinners evangelization, and the Bible studies, like everything's evangelization. Okay, now here's the format. There's a half-truth in here. It is true that every activity, if done by someone who loves the Lord, can draw others closer to the Lord. But the heart of evangelization, even though the church has a very big vision for what evangelization is, that starts with the very, hope I'm not outside of the screen, starts with the very far, right, I'm far away from the Lord, I'm kind of hostile and skeptical, and the best thing you can do to bring that person closer to the Lord is just to tip well and smile and be a good friend. And of course, evangelization, that process doesn't end until someone is fruitful and sharing their faith with others, and what we might call a spiritual great-grandparent. The center of evangelization, this is the key truth, the center of evangelization is the proclamation that you are not alone. That you are loved, not despite your faults and sins and weaknesses, you are loved in your faults and sins and weaknesses. And that gift that is offered to you in the person of Jesus Christ requires a response. That's a summary of what I just gave you is a summary of the good news. It's a summary of the gospel. And John Paul II says that is the pivot point. That is the hinge on which all evangelization turns. Everything we do leads up to that, and everything that comes afterwards, teaching people about the faith, right, helping to send them on mission, all of that pivots on a clear proclamation that in Jesus Christ, everything is different. So what does that mean practically? Anybody here a catechist? Anybody ever try and pass the faith on to someone who didn't really want it? Yeah, that's a... It's like everybody. Well, practical consequence, right? Trying to give people information about the faith, what the church calls catechesis, before they've had a moment of encounter, before they've come to a personal decision, is kind of fruitless. And you know that intuitively. It's a painful reality. You can feel it. They're like, they don't want to be here, and I don't either, right? I'll give you an example maybe to bring this to life. My lovely wife, Father Lewis was very hospitable at welcoming her to Omaha. She wrote for the Catholic Voice when she first came to Omaha. Her high school, junior high sport was competitive jump roping. I didn't even know competitive jump roping was the thing. I certainly wasn't interested in it. But then when I met her and fell in love, I'm like, tell me about competitive jump roping. I suddenly was very interested in competitive jump roping. That's the way it is with Jesus. When people find the Lord and they have an encounter with Him, then they're interested to learn more about Him and what He teaches and all that. But until that moment, it's just not all that interesting. Now, I mean, sometimes people's curiosity is aroused by the total counterly intuitive teaching of this man. But generally speaking, you have to fall in love first before you want to know about the other. So that's myth number one. It's not all evangelization. I mean, it's kind of, but there's a key pivot point, the proclamation of the gospel. Okay, number two, we need to renew ourselves first. We need to renew our parish first. This is one of my favorite, because people who care about evangelization, and they thought about it, they recognize the half-truth in this, in that, well, it is true that we cannot give what we don't have, right? That we have to rediscover something of the Lord before we can go give it to others. But oftentimes, we have to work on ourselves first. Just ends up becoming a fruitless self-referential, to use kind of a Pope Francisism, self-referential exercise. And here's your little metaphor for this, because here's the key truth. This is Pope Francis from Evangelization. Lengthy training is not required of someone who has truly met the Lord. Once you've encountered the Lord, you can't shut them up. You can't keep them from sharing. Sometimes it's a little awkward and rough around the edges, but you don't have to go to people who've fallen in love to talk about who they've fallen in love with. Right, I mean, you were once this way. Many of you are married. I'm kidding, I'm still this way. But right, like, I know you're all happily married, but you're like, you can't keep someone. It's a newlywed, it's so obnoxious, right? Or the newly engaged, like you can't keep them from talking about their beloved. So here's an example of this. Some of you know the story of the Titanic cruise ship. Goes down, and of course, a lot of people know there weren't enough lifeboats. But what most people don't know is that even the lifeboats that made it in the water were half full. And a number of people who are in the water, they're in the frigid water, they're freezing to death. As they're freezing to death, they're screaming and calling for help. And the lifeboats sat off in a group and did nothing. And as they would think about going out, they'd stay put because of the objection of their passengers. And only a few of them actually made the journey to pick up a few souls that are in the water. And the crew members that finally decided to do that did that with this realization: ma'am, this is not a cruise ship. This is a lifeboat. It's half true that we need to begin with ourselves. But if we really want to get that renewal right, the key truth is what we're rediscovering, what we're like renewing about ourselves is our own missional identity. Saint Paul VI said the church exists to evangelize. If that's true, that means that you exist to evangelize, because you are, as a baptized and confirmed member of the church, you are the church. But also it means that the local embodiment of the church in your parish exists to evangelize. What does that mean? Well, put another way, it means your parish exists, at least in part, for its non-members. You're a lifeboat, right? You are a missional outpost. So when we talk about renewing ourselves, if we first understand ourselves as missional, then it changes what we like. Then we're not so much interested in changing the music just so we like it, and we're not so much like getting like better pads on the seats and maybe like a cup holder, for this little boat, because we realize we're not made to be a cruise ship. We're made to be a lifeboat. So we want to make sure the thing doesn't sink. We want to make sure that it's not taking on water. But our primary emphasis in renewal is a better outboard motor, so we can get to the people who are hurting faster. I think I can see a couple of heads exploding. Like this is like, we don't think of ourselves, right? We don't think of our parishes as existing for its non-members. But that's who we really are. When Jesus says, "Come follow me," that's an incomplete sentence. He says, "Come follow me and I will make you fishers of men." You cannot separate discipleship from mission. Okay, myth number 3. If we think this one's gonna, I think this is gonna get a couple of you. If we just fix the liturgy, evangelization will work itself out. Oh, good, I got a couple. Sorry, Father, I'm not trying to pick on you. Okay, this is a quote from a number of seminarians, not from the Archdiocese of Omaha, but I think they would probably say this. They'd say, we got the impression in seminary, because we never talked about evangelization, that if we just get the liturgy right, evangelization will work itself out. Okay, half-truth. It is true that the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Christian life. All of the activity of the church is leading towards the Eucharist and is flowing from the life of our Lord placed in us at the Mass. However, Vatican II's document on the liturgy itself says the liturgy does not exhaust the church's activity. It must be preceded by evangelization and catechesis. You ever noticed? I mean, maybe you've gone to like a non-Catholic, or had like non-Catholics at a wedding, right, or a funeral, You know how disorienting it is for them? And especially if you get like Lutherans and they're like, oh gosh, so they're our Father, right? So they're like, yeah, and they're praying along because they finally know this one. And then we stop and they're like, for thine is the kingdom, and like, because they're like, they're actually finishing the liturgical prayer, but we've got to pause. They're like, no, actually, Father has a line first, and then you guys can come back in, right? They're like, the Mass, by its very nature, is inhospitable to newcomers. And that's by design. Now, I think our music should be better, and I think our greeters should be more friendly, and I'm all about trying to make the Mass more beautiful and more welcoming to an extent, but it is by a design an insider's game. Like the RCIA thing, where like it's mostly symbolic now, but where like those who are not yet baptized or confirmed leave in the liturgy. It's a family meal. And it's okay that there's inside joke, but you know what? The Mass isn't supposed to be the main or only place where people encounter the faith. They're supposed to encounter it from the guy in the cubicle next to them. They're supposed to encounter it with the other guy in the golf course. They're supposed to encounter it in their neighbor and the other women at the park and all like they're supposed to encounter the gospel all over the place and meet Jesus in us, our words and our actions. And then, after initiation, come into the liturgy. Trying to make the liturgy the place for that just breaks the liturgy and breaks evangelization. Okay, number 4, and then you guys get to ask questions. It's got to be harder to evangelize now in the context of all the recent scandals. This is my favorite. I love this one. It was actually a 3-point talk, and I just decided to add this for y'all tonight because it's timely, right? I mean, there's a little meme going around. If you don't know what a meme is, ask a cool neighbor, and they'll tell you about it. But basically, there's a little like cartoon that I think it's actually from a tornado coming through Joplin, Missouri. Took out the entire town. So there's like wreckage, but this is of a McDonald's. Sometimes the McDonald's have like the stone Ronald McDonald's. So there's this like wreckage in the background, and there's this like stone Ronald McDonald like sitting on the park bench, like smiling, and there's just like total wreckage behind him. And the meme went out. It's like what it feels like to be a lay employee of the Catholic Church in America today. Like, the 2002 stuff was hard, but we all told ourselves, okay, a couple bad apples. That's not us. That's not who we are. It's not deep. It's not systematic. And the people who wanted to leave left, and those of us who loved the church stayed. But I do not think, that's why I said it was a myth, I do not think evangelization is harder because of that. There's a half-truth there, right? The half-truth is that it is true that the world will know that we are Christians and thus be attracted to us and to the faith because of our love and our courage and our honesty and our mercy. And it's true that those things have taken a pretty big hit in the public eye lately. But the real key truth in this is the best thing about us has always been Jesus Christ. I mean, let's just be honest. Like the food at the potlucks is just not that good. The music is not that good. People are not that welcoming. Every now and then, certainly not with your chaplain, but sometimes the preaching goes long. Let's be honest. Like the best reason to be a Catholic and a Christian is Jesus Christ. Right? Amen. We cannot, it's pretty silly now to start to talk about ourselves. Right? If you happen to be in sales, I'm in the sales department. If you happen to be in sales, trying to sell the church is harder now. I'll totally admit that, but we should have never been trying to sell the church to begin with. You sell Jesus Christ and the church comes with it. And it works like this. I mentioned I have 6 children, and I've been present at all 6 births of my children, although one was in question when I was in the master's program with Bernadette, but I made it. Funny thing, when the head comes first, the rest of the body comes with shocking rapidity. The Besmers are like, yeah. Some of you have been there, right? When Jesus Christ is the head, When a human heart labors to accept Jesus Christ, accepting the church is so much easier. Like it comes with it. But if it goes the other way, if someone falls in love with the church and for some reason remains a stranger from Jesus Christ, you could lose the baby. That's not a healthy situation, especially not today. I mean, if you know fallen away Catholics, most fallen away Catholics don't say, well, I mean, I love Jesus and I loved the Eucharist, but then I met my evangelical friends and they got to have coffee at Mass. No. Usually, if you talk to your evangelical friends, what they say is, I was Catholic all my life, and nobody ever taught me how to pray. Nobody ever taught me how to read the scriptures. And I finally know who God is right now. And he's real, and he's intimate, and he's a part of my life. And of course, that's tragic for us because there is no better way to have intimacy with Jesus Christ than in the Catholic Church, in the Eucharist. But they didn't know that. They probably wouldn't have left if they knew that. Last example, right? We're getting close to the holidays. I love my wife. I love my in-laws. I'm noticing that the conversation is being recorded, so I love my in-laws. But with total honesty, I don't think I would spend Thanksgiving with my in-laws if it were not for the presence of my beloved. Right? I mean, they're kind of weird. They do things differently. Different. Let's not say weird, let's say different. They do things, it's weird. I would not spend, but you know what, it's funny. Like when I'm with her, they make all the weirdness and idiosyncrasies not only tolerable, but actually charming. Right? And you're like, no, my in-laws. No, but when you have fallen in love with Jesus, suddenly the music and some of the awkwardness and ugliness of his children, right, and the body, it's less distracting. Not saying that we shouldn't work on being holy, but it's a little bit less distracting. So let me leave you with this, and then I'm eager for questions. The concept of evangelization can sometimes be challenging because I suspect many of you, I don't know, maybe there's a few people with a more Mary Magdalene story, but most of you are probably the best Catholic you know. And you've probably been the best Catholic you know most of your life. And so when people start talking about evangelization, and you get the sense that they're talking about evangelizing you, it can kind of make you bristle. That's why I really appreciate the language that the Archbishop uses, the vision and priorities, because we're searching for a renewed encounter. And you can't see this any better than the story of Emmaus Road, right? It's after the resurrection, it's after the crucifixion, of course. And there's this story, there's these two disciples, and they're headed towards this little town of Emmaus. They're walking away from the Christian community, and they're really discouraged. And Jesus kind of sneaks up on them, and he joins the conversation. And it's hilarious, because what are you talking about? And they're like, do you not know? Which is hilarious, because he's the only one who really does know what just happened. And he meets them right in the midst of their discouragement. Now, these are disciples. These are Christian disciples. They love the Lord. They know the Lord. They know most of his teaching, very well catechized. But they're discouraged, and they're headed the wrong way. And it isn't until the Lord comes into their discouragement, into their midst, and they have this renewed encounter with him, which of course finds its climax in this beautiful foreshadowing of the liturgy. Scripture and liturgy, Jesus does a little Bible study on the way, and then they break the bread. That changes everything. They were already Christians. They already knew about the cross. They had already heard about the resurrection. But they needed a renewed encounter. So I'd be remiss if I didn't invite you to that yourself. Let the Lord encounter you. Because after that encounter, everything changes. Right? They immediately become evangelists. They immediately become missionaries, and they run back. So wherever you're at, wherever your discouragement is, wherever your pain, wherever your confusion, your frustration, watch for that mysterious figure, right? However the Lord chooses to sneak up on you, and let him renew your hearts and send you back on mission. Thank you. Awesome.